Hello, welcome to Data Ki Baat. This is Sanjeev. You cannot solve the business challenges of today with the skills of past. And that's pretty much going to be our topic today, that what is that you need in the data-driven world, what kind of a skill that you need to be successful, how things have changed over past. Remember earlier, I used to be a database administrator a long back, right, 18 years ago. So the main focus used to be like, how do I make sure that database is up and running, the infrastructures are in place, and timely release of certain reports, and which was basically giving a business a lot of idea about probably how to do the business. But over the if you think about today, things have really changed. The technologies have changed. The problem that we are trying to solve has also changed, and then the way business is expecting and trying to make decisions with the data, it has become really very important to look at the different skills that we need in today's time. And that is exactly the topic of today. And for that, I have invited Peter Aiken for this discussion, where we are going to talk about how you need data acumen along with the business acumen to be successful in this data driven world. So I welcome Peter on this show. Peter,
Sanjeev,
over to you.
It's very pleasant to be with you this morning. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Peter, if you would like to talk a little about this two term that keeps on coming, right? We are talking about business acumen and then data acumen, right? So how about starting that? What is the difference between both of these, right? And why data acumen is also needed in this digital world today to be able to be successful?
Thank you, Sanjeev. And again, it is a popular topic these days. Most of the data literacy descriptions that people are talking about today, the first question that they ask is this on your plan for 2021? And if not, why not? So let's talk a little bit about business versus data acumen. In a business context, one would hope to have some business acumen after one had experienced the business for a bit. For example, if one was in sales, one would not expect to start out as a great salesperson the very first job. But perhaps after a year or two, or a couple of sales calls, we would start to develop the business acumen around sales. And these talk to various levels. And I like to always go back when we talk about levels to something that maybe some of you learned in school. This is Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. So if we can go to the slides and just
absolutely
print them up here.
Yep, it's there.
So Maslow, back in the 1950s, invented this hierarchy where he described that we as people have certain needs, but that these needs come in response to certain other things that are happening in the environment. It's a maturation process. So the first need that Maslow described was the need all human beings have to have food, water, and sleep. If the physiological needs are not met, then it's impossible to get to the next level. If you need food, water, or sleep, then you will not be safe. And if you are safe, if you get to the point where you are safe, then the next thing that happens is that you discover that you are part of something that is bigger than yourself. In this case, friendship, family, love, and belonging. And the next level up from that is that if we know how we are as a part of the bigger human race, then it is possible to discover what our individual contribution can be. This is the theme. And finally, we get up to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs with a concept that everybody likes to go to called self-actualization. And when we talk about business acumen, in this case, we're talking about the salespeople perhaps coming in at the physiological level, but when they start to develop the acumen, they've maybe gotten up to the safety level or the love and belonging level. They have matured in that process. In the same way that businesses value salespeople who are experienced, or other types of business professionals who are experienced, or Sanjeev, like yourself, when you were a DBA as you started out in this process, they would also like you to not only do the basic things that are going on around that database, but in this case, for you to understand how that database is now used in context. And I'm sure that's what's made you a successful IT person, is that you were able to look at databases beyond just the fact of saying we have a database, but now you're looking at why do we have a database? And I'm sorry for giving you a long-winded answer, but it's a kind of an interesting one in that sense.
Yeah. No, I think it is basically, comes down to how well you are going beyond just a storage, just a IT infrastructure and the data that's going to help, and then taking it beyond that, what and how data can help you within a certain context. Great, great, really. So is there any difference between, I mean, we also keep hearing that data literacy, right? So is it really different if you really see data literacy versus data acumen? Are they same or different?
I'm distinguishing them. If you Google the term data literacy, you will see lots and lots of definitions. But unfortunately, just the same way as Maslow discovered that human beings' hierarchy of needs, we also have a similar set of data needs as well. So literacy is what we would call the bottom level. And anybody that has a mobile device should have some level of data literacy. After all, they are carrying around in their hands a very powerful supercomputer. And that supercomputer has the power to be good and the power to be bad, just as all technology does as well. That in and of itself is not going to be enough to get you into the process of helping the workforce. So I have a similar type of chart here. I'm going to put this other chart up as well, where we talk about these 5 levels that are associated with data literacy at this point. And I call this a digital civics framework. The key here is that these are things that society should be requesting of people who are participating in society. So the literacy level is everything that is below the red line. I've broken them down also into 5 levels as well. And the bottom 2 levels you can see are called mobile data spreaders, because they are not adults. So they are the 2.5 billion people out there who have, in this case, mobile devices. And they may or may not have this level of literacy, but this is a level of literacy they should aspire to getting towards in there. So as mobile data spreaders, they are out there interacting with society and with all of our society systems, but they are not adults. So the next level up then brings them to adult levels. And that's just simply a matter of time. If you spend enough time on the planet, you will mature into whatever your society turns you into as an adult. We don't have rules for adults or children in this case regarding their data literacy. So we can suggest there are things that they should have. And what I've done in this framework here is come up with 17 specific CDLNs. It's the column on the far right on your screen. They are citizen data literacy needs. So the first 9 are literacy. The next 2 up there then become what we're getting into, where we talk about acumen, where we've got somebody who is more experienced as well. And we're still talking below the red line there. So it's going from levels 1 and levels 2.
Okay. So are those element that we have to, so basically when it comes to looking at the levels, right? I mean, so there is certainly a way to probably measure the level of data literacy for anybody, right? Because as you know, right, if you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So is there any way that you propose we can probably take a survey or do something to measure the level of what level that person is from the data literacy standpoint?
Yes, there is. And Interestingly, the United States government has been doing surveys around the world to keep track of these literacy levels in there. Now, the US government's survey is not specifically focused on data. Instead, it talks about mathematical literacy, it talks about the actual ability to read and write, and it talks about the ability to work in a digital environment. The interesting thing about those worldwide surveys that the government has been keeping track of is that we haven't improved between the time of 2012 and now. And that's a very disturbing finding because, as you know, a lot has happened to the world in the last 10 years, including the amounts of data that have come and that are now facing us as a society. These have increased by tremendous amounts, and if our overall literacy has not, I consider that to be a step backwards.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you have to really see, like earlier, right, earlier days or nowadays also, right, business acumen is really important. We are not saying it is not important. What we are saying is that let's also add the data acumen to be more successful. So how do you spot and what are the different elements that when you see and you say and then you kind of say that okay, this person or this leader has the required data acumen in him or her.
So, of course, we have to have objective criteria for this. And this has been one of our challenges in the data community is to figure out where we can measure this in an objective manner. For example, you use the term data-driven or data-centric, perhaps.
Right.
And everybody says, yes, I would like to be more, I would like to do more with data. I would like to get more out of it. I would like to have people who are more data literate in my environment. What does that specifically mean? And if we don't have objective criteria for this, then we have some big challenges in society. So let's go now above the red line that I'm showing on the screen here to the definition of a knowledge worker. And knowledge workers, there are more than 1 billion of them on the planet. In today's environment, it is imperative that organizations start to screen their knowledge workers for their data literacy ability. In this case, we're really trying to screen them for data acumen, a higher level than just being able to read and write. Right. This data acumen can show up in a number of different ways, but I've got, in this case, 22 specific things that they should be tested for. And just as with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these levels are also additive. So everything that an adult data spreader and a mobile data spreader and a knowledge worker has should all be accumulated in that. And that businesses, they haven't started, but they will start very soon screening their knowledge workers for data acumen.
So is it all about technology? Because I mean, with my experience of really working and knowing people and talking to people in the show like this, I have seen that there is obviously a lot of focus on technology and in hope that it will solve all of their data challenges. What is your thought on that? I mean, again, I'm not against technology. People process technology, it has to go hand in hand, but how much emphasis we should give on the technology versus looking at the fundamental and basic first and then going along with the technology. What are your thoughts?
Sanjeev, that's such an insightful question because you're right. Everything in the world has to balance on a stool that has at least 3 legs of people, process, and technology, exactly as you had said. And yet what we find over and over and over again is that there is an overemphasis on technology. In fact, there are some actual numbers on this. Our friend Randy Bean, who works at the Harvard and MIT CDO conferences and has a consulting company that he publishes these out just about every January. So we should be looking for some new numbers coming from him very soon. And he asks the question of thousands and thousands of business people who are out there who say, what are you doing to do more with your data? And they will give him specific answers. And then he says, please categorize your problems for me. And I think I actually have that slide here. So let me just jump to that one slide because it's kind of surprising. Yes, here we go.
Interesting. I'd like to see that.
So companies are really falling behind at being data driven. And
Mhm.
this was actually from his survey. So this is the 2019 survey that he did, where he asked people, companies in this case, are you self-identifying as being data-driven? And in 2017, you can see the number was 37%, but the number has started falling since then. And we don't know why that is. We need more research, but I would believe that it, just like you, I think it leads to an understanding that maybe data is not understood or can't be solved from strictly a technology perspective. In fact, when we ask other questions around this too, are you competing on data and analytics? The majority say no. Are you treating data as a business asset? Again, the majority say no. Are you creating a data-driven enterprise? Are you forging a data-driven culture? These are obviously things that are not there. But here's the important piece. On his 2019 survey, he said it's 5% technology and
Oh,
95% people in process. I'm glad you reacted the same way you did. I reacted exactly the same way, Sandeep.
oh my God.
And
Oh my
he
God.
did another study a little later after that on 20, so the beginning of this year, it's 10%. But you can see technology is not where the bulk of these things go into. It is really much more about the people and the process sides of things than it is the other.
Yeah, it is quite surprising for the people who know me. I love technology, but from the very beginning, I believe that your success in terms of in with data or maybe whatever objective that you have to really achieve with data is lot on the process and people than the technology. I think that having said that, right, you got to really bring the technology perspective, later part of the process. But you can't start with the technology is something that I always try to promote or advocate. That's the right word. And there's interesting insight that you have just shared, and I'm so glad that it is completely aligned with what we are talking here, and then what probably many of us also believe. So really glad to see that, Peter.
Absolutely. And let's take it a step further though. What do we teach knowledge workers about data? And the answer is practically nothing. Some like yourself will learn it on their own.
Mhm.
You grew up in an IT environment, so you were always exposed to data going in and out of the databases. And
Right.
your question, one of the reasons you've been more successful, one of the reasons you have a higher level of data acumen than others is because you also cared about what happened to that data, where did it come from, and where is it going to? And of course, my definition of a knowledge worker is anybody who messes with data. So
Mhm.
consequently, we have a big disconnect in society that we need to address, and that's perhaps some of the collaborative things that we can do as a data group to try and
Right.
help the rest of the world.
No, absolutely. That's where this data community, or the data, forums or meeting or conversation like this really helps, because it kind of reiterates the, thoughts. At least people will go and think that, hey, oh, this is what it is. Maybe, I mean, I was like thinking differently. I think I can bring one example. One of my, friend on the LinkedIn was sharing that this, I'll not go by the name, but so the thought was that I want to create a data catalog, and being so that I can really access all my information. And then what they did is that they basically started, they basically first jumped on the tool itself. And what I got to know that it's been like a year now, they're still kind of struggling, even even with the tool that they have. Right, tool is there, but still the objective is not achieved. Really having a right data catalog in place, all the information accessible. So that gives me good indication that probably the mistake was to start with the tool rather than look at the process. I think that could have been one of the reason why, despite having best of the best of the tool available, we are not able to really achieve the level of data governance or information governance in our day-to-day work. So.
And I'm looking for another slide that I have. I don't know that I have it in this deck, but one of the things we have discovered quite clearly is that
Mhm.
a minimum of 80% of all organizational data is data that is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And if we simplify that to data rot, then we now start to realize that we shouldn't be putting time in improving all of the data. Instead, what we should really look at is finding which data is good. And then we can take that data that is good and try to improve it in a much more productive fashion.
Yep, I think these are one of the very common question that people say that, okay, I want to do data governance, I want to govern my data well, I want to keep all my data in the best of the best quality, and people ask that, okay, where to start? And obviously we have a huge data chunk. Everybody kind of has a lot of data within their organization or what they do, but there is always an inclination that, okay, I will start solving all my problem. I will probably boil the entire ocean and not start, like you rightly said, right? You got to start from certain domain as such. You got to pick the probably a low hanging fruit, something that is going to give you the maximum impact, rather than boiling the entire data ocean for yourself. I mean, I think that's the right way in my view also, to start the data governance, or basically mastering your data, as we call.
Absolutely. And remember, too, that when we're talking about data among ourselves, this is something that we care about because we're data professionals and we're passionate about our subject. But most other people don't share that level of excitement there. And so we have to also improve our ability as storytellers to try and draw people into this, because we're very good at describing that data things are happening out there in the world. But if
Mhm.
we don't show that those data things cause actual things to happen in the world, in other words, something happens with data, therefore something happens in the world. And if we don't connect the two of those, we'll have lots and lots of continued disconnect where people just do not understand exactly what their role is with respect to data. So one of the other things that I've discovered is that above the line, the ethical perspective on this is actually you're much more likely to be involved in fooling or manipulating people, and that you are going to be held to organizational values, because when the organization hires a knowledge worker, they're going to
Mhm.
put them under a code of conduct. They're going to
Mhm.
say, just as we expect you to behave, well as a person, we expect you to behave well as a data person as well. And there's
Mhm.
very specific things that we need to put into lower levels of education so that everybody who comes up through our society and today will be data very much have a much higher level of data acumen than they would or than they do currently today.
Absolutely. So, I mean, looking from the, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? What is the role that all of this can probably play in making sure? I mean, so I'm not talking about individual now. I'm just getting back to the organization and department, right? Suppose a top of the data, organization really wants to say drive this kind, I mean, data acumen, skills or trait within their employees. How would he, or how he or she would start uh, from, maybe a couple of steps that you can probably talk about, easy to get started with the
Sure.
data acumen. I mean, it would be really helpful, because I know there are a lot of levels that you talked about, but how somebody can kind of get started very quickly with this.
And we won't go through all of these here, but this is the first level. So again, just as you've tried to make more clear to everybody in your audience here,
Mhm.
what are the definitions? Here are some specific, in this case, citizen data literacy needs. And I also said put the responses in there as well. So just as a knowledge worker, you must know how to secure data. You must know whether you can trust data. You must be able to evaluate surveillance and convenience trade-offs.
Mhm.
Again, Google wants to connect with your address book and do everything that you can. There's some good reasons why that might be a very good idea, but there are also some other reasons why perhaps another app should not have access to your address book. And again,
Right.
these are just the low level here. You need to understand what is good and what is bad internet behavior, and be able to recognize it as appropriate.
Right. Right. Right, right. Thanks. So if you look at the various, I would say, elements within the data acumen, I mean, for the person's ability to really probably look at the data, kind of make sense of it. Not only make sense of it, also think about the context, people behind the data, all of those, right? How do you see those certain people doing this versus not doing this, and what different the person with that skill would probably do certain things versus those who do not have the skill.
So let's
uh,
go to the most important one right there, because that is really, what's in it for the employer as well as for the employee. And I
right.
think those are very good questions to have. So the first one is, what's in it for the employer? If the employers hire people who have a higher level of data acumen than perhaps they weren't otherwise doing. In other words, you have two candidates for a job, they're both equally qualified. I'm now suggesting that organizations should put an additional level of evaluation to say, what is the level of acumen that that person has? Because if we're going to engage them in activities in support of our organization, we can hold them to an organizational code of conduct. And that's important because that now says, if we say this is bad for the organization, then you, as an employee of the organization, should not engage in that kind of behavior if you are attempting to fool or manipulate somebody. And that these values can be organizational values that we can put in place. So, again, let's go back to Google's old motto. Remember, that was "Don't be evil," right? Well, great. This says if you're a knowledge worker working for Google, you should not be evil. Now, maybe that's a little bit simplistic, but nevertheless, it is still useful in there in the sense that we can objectively look at this. We can't control behavior below that red line because those people are not under a code of conduct. I know of no government in the entire world that has said, in order to be an adult, you must have this level of data literacy. Right, so we can't control those, but we can control the ones who we are paying, and that's the important distinction here. This will now start to become a brand with associated companies. Again, different organizations, different companies. Again, maybe we'll talk about the difference between Coca-Cola and Pepsi, perhaps, right? And maybe Pepsi has not data literate people, but Coca-Cola does. I am absolutely certain that in the long run, Coca-Cola will outperform Pepsi if that was the case, that the organization decided to go in that direction.
Oh, great. I mean, that one question that came in my mind while you were explaining. So, you just suggested that anybody looking at a certain employee, and they should now evaluate this, area like data acumen as well. Don't you think that would bring, certain, people, or maybe a person who is evaluating also kind of be trained to evaluate that as well, right? Because until I am trained to evaluate that who has got this acumen or not, I got to also be able to identify those key elements, those key traits that person is exhibiting.
Absolutely.
Don't you think? So how what are your thoughts, and then how to do that then? Because that's gonna be a different, I think, profession altogether for people like interviewer in this case.
And these are initial thoughts too, certainly. So I'm a very big fan of George Box's famous quote where he says, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So I'm not going to say this model is correct, but I'm going to hopefully say it's useful given that. So let's just pretend that you're a hiring manager and you have two candidates in front of you, and you've been told by your boss, hire the one, all other things being equal, who is more data acumen than the other one. What is one way that you could evaluate that? Well, you could ask to see their organization, their contacts book. And if their contact book has lots of duplicates in it, or they don't even use the contacts on their mobile device, that might be an indication that that person has less data acumen than a person who has thousands of contacts, and they're all perfectly organized with dates and times and birth dates and holidays and all the rest of the things. It's really a matter of displaying that organization. Another place that you can go to look too is their musical piece. If they happen to like music, and some people don't, so that's okay too. But if you happen to like music and you just throw all of your music in a big playlist, that's not very easy to find things in. So looking at their music app and seeing how they've organized their music that way, how they organize their file structure, all of these things can be indicators that can show a person has a higher degree of data acumen than perhaps another individual who hasn't learned those skills.
That's really very easy way, I would think, to really, I think normally people would probably not think in this direction, right? Because
I'm hoping
they
we'll
might
start.
they might eventually ask some of the data related technical questions maybe, and hopefully that person might just answer that. But
Exactly.
that doesn't mean that he's really carrying those mindset. I mean, I always go by mindset here, right? I mean, data is all about mindset, is what I believe,
I
and I
agree.
think Acumen kind of also relates to that in a way. So great one. I think I will remember this two suggestion. I think we can probably coin many other scenarios, such like you just explained, right? Asking about the contact, asking about their probably interest, and then asking that, okay, how organized they are with their interest in terms of data, and that might just tell us, right? I mean, they are having a right data acumen.
It's
Great.
a starting
This
point.
great. I think that really helps a lot. I would go one level down a little bit in a detail, that if somebody has to figure out and get started, knowing that probably assume that they know that, okay, where they are. I mean, that is why I asked this question: how do you measure? There is something called like as is. I mean, at this moment I am probably at a level 1, or I'm just making it up, like level 1 or 2 at data acumen. Then if I have to start and reach certain level, a higher level, right? What and where they should get started? Is there probably a course that they can do, or is there like we used to do, right? Business acumen, there is a training out there. I saw that. But how do we do that with the data?
So absolutely, and that after, so I'm working on with a set of colleagues on a book called Danger, Don't Feed the Data Syndicate, around this, that will have these concepts in the idea, because unfortunately most people, when they're talking about this, I'm going to go back and put my slide back up here, and most people, when they're talking about this, they're arguing about the levels, in this case, of data professionals, and whether a data scientist should have 4 years of statistics or 8 years of statistics. And those are all off the top of my chart. And the reason for that is very simple. When we look at how many people are involved from a societal perspective, we have 7.7 billion people on the planet right now. And of those, 2.5 billion of them are carrying around mobile devices. So they are already mobile data spreaders. Of those, 1.5 billion of them are adults, which means we have then 1 billion of knowledge workers that we'd like to have. So I'm really arguing for an education to the masses, which means we've got to put this back down into places before you graduate from your grade school, that start to address these. And we need a whole nother set of capabilities in society in order to start making a big difference here. Because if we just focus on you and I, Sanjeev, who are already data acumen very high, it's not going to help, because unfortunately you and I are just individuals. What we really need to do is address the vast majority of people out there who are the 1 billion knowledge workers who interact with data every day and yet have very, very low data literacy rates.
I agree. I know, being in this part of the world where we are, personally, I mean, my initiative that I'm trying, I think that whole idea is to how do we make it so simple that everybody kind of have it as their day-to-day conversation. Data should be part of the day-to-day conversation. We should not probably look at it that it is so complex that I can't use it, and then he or she who is probably a data analyst must only use it. It has to be probably everybody's cup of tea, right? That's the whole
Absolutely.
idea, right? So one question on this slide, right?
Mhm.
So are you recommending that there need to be a lot of change at the ground level and education system as well?
I think
In,
so. Yes,
Mhm.
I think we need to really focus. So when I look at many data literacy presentations that are being made by my colleagues today, and
Mhm.
lots of good ideas that are out there, but they're
Mhm.
really talking about, how do we refine the people who are there at the top of the
Right.
pyramid? And that's not
Mhm.
going to have any impact on society. We need to
Mhm.
make a difference here, and this is really the numbers that we're dealing with on this slide are the more important numbers.
Right. Absolutely. I am so happy to see this slide, and then I'm very excited about the thought that it's kind of connect with me so well that we are trying to solve the problem where probably there is a lot of resources. They might probably be much more able to support themselves, but how about the masses,
Mhm.
which is going to really impact the society. The programs that government is trying also, right? If you really see that, if you want to have a successful program that government is trying to do, there has to be somebody, not somebody, everybody at the level of society should be able to know that what's going on. How do you really measure the success? What are the different questions that they should ask to, probably nudge the policymaker to do things differently if it is not working, rather than closing their eyes and thinking that everything is working fine.
We know how well that works, right?
Yeah.
Sanjeev, if it were the case that you and I were in charge, I would go back to my first chart and say that nobody should be handed a mobile device unless they have achieved a certain level of data literacy prior to doing that. Now, the problem is we can't change the behavior of every parent out there. And
Right.
so that is a big challenge for us. But we can put societal pressure on them and say, is your child out there running around spreading data without any thought to this? And if that's
Mhm.
the case, maybe there should be some more thought around it.
Absolutely. Agree. I got one, couple of questions here. I'll read out Raja, who is, at this moment, participating in the live conversation, is sharing that how important is business acumen correlate with the technology offerings. Real life experience suggests technology specialists struggle knowing the domain rather than business first. Period.
Absolutely. And if we look at the main critique of data scientists today, that we will see there's three things that people say about them. One, they are not productive enough. Two, they are not really interested in supporting the business. They are more allied with their algorithm
Mhm.
around that. And so that we reward them for doing something new with their algorithm, but we
Mhm.
have to add another criteria to that and make that they have to be not just new, but new and useful at the same time. And the criteria for evaluating this is one that I've used for many years, which may sound a little bit self-serving, but I say that whatever we're doing that's new has to be useful enough that a full professor will want to become interested in it, and easy enough that they can actually achieve what they're trying to with the technology. So if we're putting technology out there that requires a high priest in order to use it, that is not something that we can use to spread and improve the data acumen of society. We've got to get way beyond that level.
Right. And I can't see the name, but one of the user at this moment is, echoing with your thought that Peter is spot on. Most of the big data is redundant, almost 80%. Moreover, literacy and awareness comes with diverse background and experience in enterprise business acumen. I,
Absolutely. Thank you for the
yeah,
comment.
I just flashed that on the screen for you to also read. I think uh, I think everybody kind of understand that, right? But what is the and I think I'll keeping the time in mind. We are very at the close of the whole conversation. I know
Mhm.
it is not at all possible to cover this so important and vast and complex topic in this 30 minutes call, but you gave really a great insight. So finally, I wanted to ask that, right? Uh, People are aware. What you are probably sharing is that something that people would definitely agree. They know that it cannot be only technology. It has to be more of a people and process. and mindset, right? Then what is challenging? I mean, what is not happening right? Hence, we are really falling behind or lagging in terms of data literacy and data acumen.
We have
How about
a phrase called preaching to the converted. Hopefully that will translate well into your culture on that. But it's if you're always talking to people who agree with you, it's really not very helpful. And I don't mean to say anything bad about anybody. It's always nice to get compliments. But what we really need to do is to stop trying to communicate among ourselves and really look at our communication and how well we do with respect to our peers. And my favorite example of this, I think it's a very good one. Let's see if I can find it here. I may not actually have this one in this deck. There is a story that is told in the United States here very much around the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. The people who were trying to say don't launch the next morning made a very poor graph from a communications perspective. They were engineers. They were trying as hard as they could to say it'll blow up tomorrow, but they weren't able to tell that picture with story. Edward Tufte, who's a very famous data visualization foundation person, has created a chart on this where he shows that the graph is going upwards in terms of the potential failure with respect to the temperature going down. So the lower the temperature, the more likely things were to blow up. And they were launching the day of the Challenger disaster at 20 degrees, in this case Fahrenheit, below where the original test was supposed to be. So the chances of having something blow up on them were almost 100%. But because people were not literate about data, they were not able to articulate this in a very nice fashion. And so consequently, we had some people lose their lives. And of course, NASA had a big setback. Of course, Elon Musk is going to fix all that stuff for us anyway, so we don't have to worry about NASA anymore, right?
Yeah, but I was reading one of the article where it was told that the success of NASA is not because they had a greatest of technology, because it had people who were, very much, having those skills that we are just discussing here, data acumen, along
Absolutely.
with it. So I think I really, have that link somewhere where it was very insightful to read that. So I think as a summary, right? How do you want to conclude this discussions, and then also next step for people listening, or maybe some links for them to follow? Peter.
Gartner has a set of constructs that they're putting around literacy here, but let me just sort of finish with this one slide here. I like to say in the data world, words matter. And so when we talk about literacy, we could talk about sort of different levels that occur there. And maybe we go literacy, proficiency, and then to acumen. So if we're looking at literate, it means the ability to read and write, and it gives somebody the ability to do this. So maybe we should call it dateracy, right? But that's a silly word, and I don't think it'll work in there. When we go a little bit further than that and say, what does proficiency mean? Well, it's really easier to define proficiency as an opposite and say, the opposite of proficient is incompetent, unskilled, inept, incapable, inexperienced. These are not words that we'd want to associate with somebody who is occupying a position of importance. But if somebody has acumen, they have keen insight, they have understanding. We use the word shrewd to describe this. And if I have the choice of getting somebody who is literate or somebody who has data acumen, I will always take the data acumen person, because they will know not just the data things, but the data things as they rely to the business, as they relate to what's happening. And Sanjeev, that's how you've made your career, by understanding how your audience out there wants to understand things and providing a need in this case, so that your shrewdness there is filling a necessary gap.
Thank you very much. I think this slide itself described the entire, session that we have had. I know there are a lot that you've shared. A couple of slides were really eye opener for me as well as for the people. A couple of them really established or maybe suggested and helped my thought process as well, and some of them really confirmed what I probably was already believing. So and that's where the communication or the conversation happens, right? Because when you're telling the story, it has to either tell user about certain things which is new, which they don't know, or it should support their already already that they believe. So it should support their belief system, right? So I think you helped me a lot personally, and I'm sure the user out there would get some benefit and then starting point around how to work on their data acumen, this new skill that they need to have to be able to successful in data world. So thank you, Peter, very much for your time today. As I said, right, it is not enough. I feel like as if we can continue more and more and talk more about your work. But yes, we got to put things at end someday, and then we'll probably come back, and then have you one more time to talk through more. So
Sanjeev,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peter. And with that, thank you everyone for watching. Great questions already, and I'm sure you have one of your thoughts very cleared out that it is not always about technology. It is about people and process and mindset if you really want to be successful with data. So keep listening. Try to go through your slide and then this talk today if you are not able to attend it live, and share with me any questions that you have, and I would bounce it with Peter for further answers